Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Always get a Ray Liotta for being supremely qualified to prove the point that you've rung in to make or that I've made. Nice suggestion, though. It might have been a useful corrective. What do you want to talk about next? I think we're going to talk about house prices. I want to take a guest on the prison situation because it is one of those things. Can I have a minute of your time? Can I go off on one of my little meanderings that isn't actually going to lead towards a phone-in, but is going to hopefully address some of the things happening to us all at the moment? The news is broken, isn't it? I mean, the last hour was a very good example of it. You know, Jeremy Corbyn facing questions about anti-Semitism for the entire year. The Conservative Party whipping people to essentially defend an anti-Semite in the European Parliament. And apart from me, and thankfully today a couple of other newspaper comment pieces rather than news pieces, and The Independent led the line on the reporting yesterday, no one's really asking questions of anyone. Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary, even used Labour's anti-Semitism problems while attempting to celebrate Jewish New Year last week. He actually couldn't even help himself on Twitter from saying Happy New Year. It's to all Jewish people, Rosh Hashanah. I hope I've said that correctly. It's important to support our Jewish friends, especially at a time when anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. Just put a call into the Home Office, will you? Ask for a comment on that. How can he be tweeting on Jewish New Year about how important it is to protect Jewish people, mentioning Jeremy Corbyn and anti-Semitism, and not doing anything to condemn his own party for essentially voting on the same side as anti-Semitism in the European Parliament? I'll take a statement from him. I won't take a statement from any of the MEPs because that's just a way of avoiding questions and scrutiny. I can't imagine the Home Secretary will speak to us, but we should at least ask occasionally. You never know. Might be a case of mistaken identity. Think they're talking to someone else, accidentally come on the programme. But I digress, because when I say the news is broken, what I mean is that the stuff that matters is not the stuff that gets the biggest headlines. I know it's always like this, and I know some days you must listen to me having my curious midlife crisis of confidence and conscience and think, oh, flipping out, James, this is as old as the hills. But remember, I describe myself perhaps inaccurately as a journalist, and I've spent much of this year working on a book that it seems or tries to address how so many people have ended up believing things that are so obviously not true or right or fair. And the obvious answer to that is the selling tickets for the ghost train. The Daily Mail, it's amazing. Here's some words you never thought you'd hear me say. Buy it. Buy the Mail. Seriously. The change in tone and direction that's been undertaken by the new editor is so quick, it's almost unbelievable. It's almost dizzy-making. They've even got the story today, which no one else has gone with, that Peter Gagan broke on Open Democracy, Peter, who you heard on the programme yesterday talking about Ireland, about Jacob Rees-Mogg's ERG being investigated over its financing by the Parliamentary Commissioner. Daily Mail have given it a full page. They've gone big on the story about the Governor of the Bank of England commenting on the economy, when, of course, the previous editor felt that Nadine Dorries was better qualified to comment on the state of the British economy than the Governor of the Bank of England. I mean, the change of pace and tone and direction of traffic is absolutely unbelievable. I don't know if it will last, and I don't know what impact it will have upon Brexit or the country at large. But I'll tell you now, when you try to work out why the news is broken, why fake news in this country is not really something that's gained traction in recent years, because we've had it, really, for the last 25 years from Rupert Murdoch and the Daily Mail, and you try and work out why the stuff that really matters doesn't get the oxygen, it's because whoever is most popular eventually infects every other level of the media. So I've watched my late father's newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, transmogrify into an underfunded version of the Daily Mail. I've watched my old newspaper, the Daily Express, convert itself into a very, very pale, underfunded imitation of the Daily Mail. You can point to The Guardian, which sells very, very little but retains enormous presence online. But The Guardian essentially preaches to the choir. When you're preaching to people who don't think that they're entrenched or don't think they're on any side in an argument, but the only messages they're getting are all from the same side of the argument, that's how you end up in a country where the news is essentially broken. And that's why the prison officer story is so interesting today, because and this is not me bigging me up, it's me bigging you up, actually. The stories I've taken calls on over the years, the things I've said to you before everything got overshadowed by Brexit, I was saying to you, care homes are huge. The imminent crisis in social care, whereby we're going to need looking after, but we're not going to have actually accrued enough cash to pay for ourselves to be looked after. And as you look at property ownership going down, there are massive reckonings on the horizon, generations, only 1 or 2 generations hence, but we never talk about them. And there's a long list of things like that callers have explained to me over the years are categorically emergencies. But because we don't feel it ourselves immediately today, and because there's no one whispering in our ear that something terrible's happening and it's all the fault of that foreigner over there, or that unemployed person over there, or that feminist over there, or that student down there, it just doesn't get the traction that it should get. And prisons, probably on the top of the list for me. The prison officers who've described to me over the years, Sam points out, the Mail have even got a story complimenting the diversity of Labour's front bench. If you think I'm exaggerating, go and have a look at Emily Thornberry's Twitter feed. Daily Mail running a story saying, well, this is nice, look how many women there are and people of colour on the Labour Party's front bench. It's almost like it's an actual reflection of modern Britain. Prison officers have been telling me for years now that cutting costs by rooting out long-serving members of staff and replacing them with underqualified, inexperienced but much cheaper members of staff, and cutting costs by having fewer officers on shifts and on landings is a tinderbox that will explode. By way of mitigation, I'd say any department that Chris Grayling has been in charge of for more than 5 minutes is almost certain to end up in chaos. But the prisons issue is very, very serious, and seems to be coming to a fruition, but we'll find out a little bit more about that before 1 o'clock. What I want to talk about instead, and it all links together sometimes, doesn't it? It all feels vaguely linked, is this. Mark Carney is probably doing more to safeguard the security of this country than anybody in Parliament on either side of the House. He is the Governor of the Bank of England and one of the world's most respected central bankers, and could therefore walk into any number of positions or enjoy a very, very comfortable retirement right now. I would love to interview Mark Carney if you know him. I'd really love to interview him, just to really sit down and pick his brains and learn. But, in fact, I'm going to be launching a new podcast under the auspices of LBC soon. So I wonder whether we should try and get Mark Carney in for that, because I'd love to know why he's doing it. Look at the shenanigans he has to endure from the usual idiots on the racist right shouting at him and abusing him and criticising him. You remember the morning after the Brexit referendum result when Mark Carney was the grown-up. Johnson and Gove looking like they'd been caught with their fingers in the biscuit tin. Cameron, Osborne packing their bags, running for the hills. Corbyn, missing in action, as usual. You remember that. Mark Carney was the one that stood up and said, all right, guys, we're going to be okay. Mark Carney was the one that brought in policies specifically designed to prevent his own economic predictions coming true. How does the bovine Brexiter respond to that? By pointing out that his economic predictions haven't come true, therefore he can't be trusted. It's quite incredible, you know? It's a bit like a firefighter turning up at a fire with a massive hose and saying, if I don't put this fire out, the building will burn down. And then he puts the fire out and everyone turns around and says, yeah, the building didn't burn down. You're a rubbish predictor of what fires can do, aren't you? So Carney's done that for us. He's not British, he's Canadian, but he's got more patriotism in his little finger than people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson have got in their entire bodies. But it doesn't mean he's infallible. Of course he isn't. But house prices will fall by 35% over 3 years if we come out with no deal. This is a briefing given to the Cabinet by the Bank of England Governor yesterday. Now, we are going to have, at some point in the future, a conversation about what the people with whom I've now lost patience, I apologise, I've kept it for 2.5 years, I've run out of patience now, people who still think unicorns are going to turn up, what they think motivates people like Mark Carney, and to a much lesser extent me. Why do you think we do this? Why do you think we keep pushing out the evidence and the facts and the challenges to the snake oil salesmen and the liars? It's a relatively thankless task, book deals and the like notwithstanding. It's not great for the soul. A lot easier to, just sort of shut up and start talking about, I don't know, parking tickets. But we don't. Mark Carney can't somehow. It's almost like a vocation for him, a sense of duty. He has got one of the toughest jobs in international finance as Brexit comes closer, and he won't walk away. He's extended his contract. That's a sign to me of immense honour, loyalty and dedication to duty, which, of course, hardcore Brexiters don't recognise. They don't know what it is. They march around like pigeons, essentially claiming to be patriots, while essentially flushing the country down the toilet. His latest intervention is chilling, actually. Briefing the Cabinet on the bank's preparations for the aftermath of leaving the European Union without a full deal, something that is seeming more and more plausible by the day. He's essentially warned that sterling would plunge, inflation would rocket, as would interest rates. Mortgage companies would then pass on those higher risk premiums to customers, and a 35% fall in house prices over 3 years would become possible. Now, if we don't see a 35% collapse in house prices over 3 years after coming out of the European Union with no deal, that doesn't make Mark Carney a fraudster or a liar. It makes him an economic forecaster of great repute who may have not gone far enough or perhaps gone a little bit too far in that economic forecast. And it's also, of course, the case that if we do crash out at the end of March next year, his first job will be to fight against all the things that he's now telling us will happen. This, for me, is the real fundamental contradiction at the heart of post-Brexit commentary, is that all of the people like Mark Carney, and my God, what would you take? Him or George Osborne, running for the hills, a few directorships and the editorship of a Russian oligarch-owned local newspaper in London, or sticking there, taking the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, outrageous commentary, criticism, having aspersions cast upon his integrity and his honesty by absolute charlatans like Jacob Rees-Mogg, but he's sticking it out, and he's not even British. He's sticking it out, and he will dedicate himself to trying to assuage and address the precise problems that he today predicts. Ah, man, we need more Mark Carneys in this world. But what would a 35% collapse in house prices do to you? Would I sound completely bonkers if I said to you, I need to check with Mrs. O'Brien, actually, on precisely where we are at the moment with regard to the mortgage. But if I said to you, as long as I don't go into negative equity, I could probably live with this. For the very simple reason that our property market, as we've discussed a gazillion times on the programme, is broken. It's completely out to lunch. What do you think? What would it mean to you? 35% collapse in the value of your house? Because I'm being a little bit naive, I know, but unless you end up in negative, because it's not just your house that comes down by 35%, all houses do. So it's only the people who've still got a lot of debt on their house, isn't it, who are going to be in massive, massive problems on this one. And because borrowing has been much, much harder since 2008, people haven't been remortgaging, they haven't been borrowing without having deposits, they haven't been getting 110% mortgages. I just wonder whether... Yeah, it does sound a bit odd now that I've said it out loud. But when I speak to everybody in the office under 30, they see this story as good news. Are they... Which one of us is bonkers? Them or me? 0345 60600973. Because I'm leaning towards them. I'm thinking if I was, in a decent job, earning a decent wage, but living essentially hand to mouth, and in terms of property, not entertaining the notion of ever getting on the ladder, I find it very hard to read a story that says house prices will crash by a third if there's a no-deal Brexit. I'd find it very hard to resist the temptation to think, oh, well, a no-deal Brexit won't be all bad then. It's 11:17. James, why do you accept the predictions of a man whose predictions on Brexit have been so poor so far? I'm not going to call you gammon, because you can spell for a start, and your language is quite modest, but you are very much punting a gammon line there. And Carney cut interest rates immediately after Brexit. He essentially prevented his own predictions coming true. This is really the grave injustice, and it would also explain why chancellors of every hue want him to stay in the job. George Osborne appointed him, I think. That's the bottom line, mate. Genuinely. And then you go on, if he's right for once, he was right last time. He only rendered his own predictions wrong by making moves and taking actions. No, I can't only explain it once. I can't understand it for you. If he's right for once, then the housing market probably does need a correction. Homeowners like us have had a fantastic decade in terms of house price appreciation. Can't get too greedy. And I was leaning towards that position myself until someone sent me a tweet that Daniel Hannan, another of the Conservative MEPs, far too busy today to explain why he voted in support of Viktor Orban's despicable regime in Hungary. Daniel Hannan has tweeted similar. If there's anything that makes you stop and think you might have got something wrong, it will be finding out that you're on the same side of an argument as Daniel Hannan. We used to call it the law of Widdicombe on the programme. If you're in any doubt at all about what to think on any given issue, find out what Anne Widdicombe thinks and do the opposite. It's a fairly reliable indicator. May need evolving, may need changing slightly. So Hannan has said something about it'd be a useful corrective to the housing market. But, you know, even a stop clock is right twice a day. So is there any argument at all in a 33% collapse in the housing market being, in some sense, good news for the country? Oscar's in New Malden. What do you think, Oscar?
Oh, hi, James. Very, very interesting topic. One that I've been thinking quite a lot about, actually, to be honest. So I was just saying to the lady that answered the phone, I think there are three types of people that we need to consider in this instance. The first two, I think, are those that already own a property, but those that consider a home to be a home.
Yes.
And the other two, that own a home but consider it to be an investment. And then you have the.
Are they living in the investment, or is someone else living?
They are living. They are living the investment. Yes. I mean,
I don't think you can separate. God, I'm in such a mood today. I'm having a crack at you for this one, but you can't separate it like that because it's usually a home and an investment. Certainly for me, it's a home first and foremost, but it's also my only capital stake in this society. Almost.
Absolutely, no, I totally agree. But I think you're sort of getting into the mentality of people and how they sort of think about homes because. Clearly, a 35% drop is meaningful in terms of monetary amount. In absolute value, that is quite a significant amount of money. However, those that potentially don't need to remortgage again in the near future would probably just think, well, I have a home and it's not such an issue for me because I still intend to be here in 10, 15 years' time and that will recover.
But if interest rates go way up, it's not just mortgages that are going to be affected, is it? I mean, history suggests that unemployment rockets when interest rates go up as well. So you might live in your asset, but you might not have a job.
No, absolutely. And I think, these are all sort of external factors that one needs to consider. But, the concept, and I think what Mark Carney said yesterday was actually very interesting and quite right to say it. But I think it's just that this third component, the one that you alluded to earlier, that, some of your colleagues are looking to buy a house and they think that this is going to be a great opportunity to get on the housing ladder. Well, I mean, I don't think so. I think that house prices dropping 35% is...
With interest rates going up.
With interest rates going up.
Borrowing becoming harder.
Unemployment increasing, borrowing becomes quite hard. I mean, I think house prices don't fall because of a supply and demand imbalance. No. Or rather, it does. But the supply and demand imbalance is driven by very harsh restrictions by banks. So
and the opposite. So the reason why we've got such an inflated housing market is because it was too easy to borrow up until 2008. People like me should never. I got a 110% mortgage.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And that's when you see demand increase significantly and house prices, rise exponentially as they have done. So, if things are tough now for those that aren't on the housing ladder, I think it's going to get significantly harder when you see, deposit requirements, increase from 20% that, I think is the norm these days to maybe 25, 30, 40% requirements.
Why would, just briefly, why would that happen? Why would deposits get even bigger if the property values were coming down? The risk of lending.
It's just the risk of lending.
Of course, because it might come down even further. So I need to make sure that even if it plummets the value of that house, the money I've lent you is not going to go. I.e., the banks are going to make sure they don't lose anything.
Well, imagine, yes, absolutely. Imagine if you see, a bank manager seeing, okay, house prices, Mark Carney's saying 35% drop in house prices right now. I want a 50% deposit because if they do go 35%, I've still got 15% that I can repossess.
Yes.
And
that's the point, isn't it? Yeah, so worst case scenario, we repossess your house and sell it. We won't actually expose ourselves to a degree whereby after selling your repossessed house, we still might make a loss. Oscar, thank you. It's beginning to clear a little, but this is what we need to unpack, why it isn't good news and I'm not so much thinking about people like this. This is from Jack. James, fantastic. Lower house prices, lower rents, much fewer buy-to-let spongers. Ex-Goldman Sachs Carney is either desperate or, again, doesn't know what he's talking about. It's that again, Jack. I can only explain it to you. I cannot understand it for you, my friend. But, of course, if interest rates rocket, then I'm afraid, arguably, people who've already got money are going to be even better placed to carry on their buy-to-let empire building than people who haven't got any. And Oscar's only one caller on this. With the greatest of respect, Jack, he does sound about 47 times brighter than you. But I'm talking to my younger colleagues and young people everywhere, people under 30, who greet the headline that house prices might crash by a third with a degree of enthusiasm, am I right? I mean, at first glance, you're thinking, oh, that'd be good, I might be able to afford something. Probably a little bit more complicated than that. We'll find out why. Rick's in Sheffield. Rick, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I've just got a bit of a perspective here from a kind of a financial side of things. Basically, a colleague of mine is a pension investor, and so he works for some quite senior banks in London, pay very well, etc.
Yeah.
He's one of the guys who tries to manage these pensions. He has said to me, we have many kind of financial style discussions about the future of the world and so forth. He said that and explained that this government and any government in the UK, unless we have a radical change in policy by a very brave government, will never build enough houses in order to actually overcome the house prices problem, because pensions fundamentally and many other UK investments are wrapped up in them. So if you crash the housing market, for example through Brexit, then you're going to end up crashing the pensions as well.
Is that because the pensions are invested in the banks that lend the money for the mortgages?
Yeah, there's a complicated answer. There's a whole bunch of reasons why. But fundamentally, large banks look after pensions for loads of people: the state, private companies, everyone else. They're all wrapped up. A lot of that is in assorted property, whether it be business and whether it be residential. And bear in mind, the pensions of the people we're talking about are often working class people. We're not talking about rich people's pensions. We're talking about normal people's pensions.
Yes, well, private pensions, so not quite normal people.
Well, I believe that state pensions as well, but I'm not an expert, so I won't say that. So
there's no silver lining to a 35% cut in house prices.
I mean, fundamentally, a lot of people will be able to buy houses, and that's great.
Well, hang on, will they though? Because all the people that can cut, I mean, there's a finite, as you remind us, a finite amount of houses. All the people that can currently afford one have got one. If they suddenly come down in value, more people might be able to afford one. But as you said at the outset, unless there's loads more houses suddenly built, why would doors suddenly open that aren't open now?
And one final point which kind of comes from that is that people like Mark Carney, maybe even Mark Carney himself, will end up fighting it in order to keep the pensions going. Because imagine the nightmare situation is that prices come down, the same people buy the same houses, and then we have to pay a lot more tax to look after the pensions.
This is what he means by stress tests, isn't it? When he says that the Britain's financial system could withstand the worst case scenario. And his job, even though the independent Republic of Gamonia fails daily to understand this, his job is to address the worst case scenarios and hope that we don't go down that path.
Yeah, I mean, so what you're describing is, if you're a mathematician, I'm an engineer, basically is a second-order effect, where it's not like you say you're going to do like an experiment, you don't just do something and there's an outcome. By saying and commenting on the experiment as it goes on, you actually affect the experiment. And so by him saying things about, we're trying to negate Brexit, we're trying to do this, that, the other, he is modifying the actual outputs. And this could easily happen with pensions, with anything else he gets involved with. Every time he opens his mouth, the reason he's so considered is because he's fully aware that things he say directly affects the outcome.
Brilliant analysis. Brilliant analysis. Yeah, it reminds me, was it your namesake Rick Astley who said everything changes but you, or was that someone else?
It's a bit too 80s for me. I was more of a rock than a pop man.
It's 11:31. Just looking at, I don't think this is irresponsible of me. It's possibly a little ignorant. That's not quite the same thing. It would appear that apart from, forgive me, but I'm going to be rude, apart from people who aren't necessarily thick but are so immersed now in clinging to the notion that Brexit is anything other than an unmitigated disaster. They have to persuade themselves that everything is viewed through the lens of Brexit. So apart from people who are still waiting for their unicorns and see this as an opportunity to attack Mark Carney, or to put on their rose-tinted spectacles and pretend that a collapse in the pound, a concomitant collapse in housing, massive decrease in pension premiums, and sundry other economic disasters you can somehow cast as good news. There does seem to be a consensus that I was completely out to lunch when I suggested that a house price crash might actually be a silver lining of hard Brexit, because it would mean a lot of people who can't currently get on the property ladder would suddenly be able to. Speaking of Brexit, Matt Kelly is the editor of the New European newspaper, which is a cracking read, by the way. He's just tweeted to say, house price crash sounds good, but watch how quickly foreign investors wade in and reinflate the market. The Germans did it in Poland. We'll be back in the EU as they'll own all our houses. 37 minutes after 11. John's in Reading. John, what would you like to say?
Spoke about this subject a couple of times already, so it's always good fun to come back to it. As well know, we
haven't spoken about the prospect of a massive housing collapse caused by hard Brexit. But I think I remember talking to you about house prices in general. Talk to me specifically, though, about this notion of a 35% crash.
So if you read into it properly, what it's nearly suggesting is, in essence, basically 35% off the value of a house. That's great if you've got the money to buy a house already. What it doesn't help is basically young people like me who's living in the house or renting from a buy-to-let landlord or landlady who is basically going to put all of the extra funds and money that it's going to charge onto us. That means it's even less likely of us getting a house in general, or be able to save any money whatsoever. So food, gas, electricity, extra rent, basically the cost of them maintaining their properties, which is just going to absolutely hammer us even more. And effectively, may come down to the point where we may have to downsize into an even smaller house or into a flat with like a shared house.
Because your costs of living everywhere else would rise exponentially, even though
it's going to be absolutely hammered. And also, it's not helping. While in Reading, we're about to get Crossrail, so that's going to hammer us even further. And it's a disaster for the town, for people who work in the
You mean properties are going to go up in value as the ease of commuting to London increases? Just address this fella. I don't know what his real name is. He tweets as Armoured Bat. As a potential first-time buyer in my 30s with a plan to save up a deposit in the next 3 to 4 years, a 30% crash in housing prices sounds quite appealing. Getting a bit sick of paying various landlords' mortgages for them. Now, I know you've already addressed it broadly, but address Mr. Bat directly, if you can.
Mr. Bat, if you are listening...
of course he's listening. He's just tweeted me 4 minutes ago. Carry on.
You know, people always jump out.
True.
If you've got... What we're looking at the moment is the bank's going to have to ask for a larger deposit of money that we don't have at the moment. You have to put money towards basic savings, the extra cost to put in towards to get onto a house. So in essence, you've got more costs. You've got more costs per month coming in, and you've got less money saving in. So it's going to take even longer for you to get that deposit. So that 3 to 4 years you may have at the moment turn to 7 to 8 years or 10 to 11 years, depending on what you're looking to buy.
With unemployment more likely and a pay rise less likely throughout that period.
So that's an interesting concept you've put there already. So if you're looking at me as a self-employed contractor, if people are less likely to spend money on, for example, tree surgery, it means there's less money for me to come in as well. So it's less money in my bank account. So I'm actually going to get hammered even more by Brexit, depending on how people react. So if a lot of people stop spending money on the hedges getting done and do it themselves, that's less money in my bank account. So if you're self-employed, you should be absolutely terrified by the fact that people are less likely to spend money.
All right, Chuckles. Any good news?
Any good news? Good news.
Can you spot? All right, hang on a minute. Here's a game you can play. I have made one massive error on the programme today. I have been talking about anti-Semitism. I've been talking about the Conservative MEPs. I've been quite rude about their motivations. I've been talking about quite complicated economic issues. I've been examining Mark Carney's reaction to Brexit, and I've been owning one particular Jeremy Corbyn supporter. But what do you think I've got wrong on the programme today?
Oh, God, don't do this to me. You're putting me on speaker.
It's huge, mate.
It's massive.
Yeah, huge.
You've got one stat wrong.
No, much worse than that.
God knows, mate. You haven't said anything about the weather?
No, nothing. I attributed a Take That song to Rick Astley.
Oh, mate, you should quit your career, mate. That's it. It's over and done now.
He's not wrong. Don't tell anyone. Ben's in. Take care, John. Ben's in Aldershot. Ben, what would you like to say?
Hiya. I'm going to come from a slightly in-between angle on this one because my partner owns a house currently with her ex-husband, and we're all very amicable, we'll all get along, but we're trying to sell this house and so we can get a deposit for another house.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it's been on the housing market since November last year, so it's been a really hard time trying to sell this house because,
Who's living in it at the moment?
The ex-husband is,
right.
And it's just kind of stagnated completely. And my worry is, and I'm a young person saying that this is probably going to be a bad thing that it crashes, is that people are just obviously, with this news that's come out today, people are going to say, oh, hang on a sec, I might as well just wait until next year to buy this lovely house.
This is the Heisenberg principle that the first caller was describing, how sometimes simply, my thanks to Incorrigible for explaining this to me, simply by describing a situation, you change the situation. So simply by coming out and saying this might happen if X happens, you change the situation because people will go, as you rightly say, well, I'm not going to do it now, I'm going to wait and see. Here you go. Here's Sam, who's just tweeted, a 31-year-old conveyancing solicitor with a flat. That means he's qualified to comment on property matters, of course. I want to move out of, currently, with an 85% mortgage. I could really do without a one-third drop in house prices, if I'm honest. So everyone's behaviour suddenly changes.
Yeah, and if it drops that dramatically, then because the money that we're relying on to get a deposit for the next house will obviously drastically reduce.
Yeah, but so will the next house. But don't forget, they'll all come down in value. So it's always important to remember that a house is worth precisely one house.
Yes.
So that's less of a worry. Can I speculate a bit about your private life, or would that be inappropriate?
You can give it a go. Yeah.
Are you sure that the ex, wants to sell the house, mate?
Yes, because we all would like to move location as well.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
100%.
Are you sure?
We've had intervention.
Because if I'm coming round, and he's the one showing me around the house, and it's been on the market since November, I'd be wondering what's happening when people turn up for a viewing, Ben.
We do make sure that he's not there.
Okay.
He only makes the place look untidy.
Yeah.
But I mean, just to go to one more point.
Of course.
One of the only options that we have left is to rent it out. And that, so then we end up being a landlord,
so that you can cover the mortgage on the old property, free yourselves up from paying it, and then pay a mortgage on a new property, and then you become essentially unwilling buy-to-let landlords. That's what happened to me, oddly, for a brief period of time. So Ben, I wish you well. I really do. I'm only teasing, although I would double check. Maybe send in a mystery shopper. It's coming up to 11:45. You're listening to James O'Brien on at LBC. The next hour, it's Russians or short skirts. What do you think? What do you fancy? Short skirts or Russians? I don't know really that there is a phone-in the Russian story, because I'm not in the mood today. Some days I am, but I'm not in the mood today for listening to people who've either swallowed Kremlin lies or convinced themselves that spending 20 minutes on the internet gives them a better understanding of international affairs than the one currently enjoyed by the head of MI6 or the Home Secretary. I just haven't got the patience for it today. What it says about Britain is an interesting question. But again, I hear what I want to hear sometimes. I see Britain as being incredibly diminished on the world stage. I see Brexit and Donald Trump as being part of Vladimir Putin's desire to destabilise the West and to essentially devalue objective truth. So the fact that he now sends people to this country to kill us and then laughs about it afterwards on international television is evidence of just how pathetic we've allowed ourselves to become. And don't forget, the people who've encouraged us to make ourselves this pathetic are generally admirers of Vladimir Putin. Isn't that a strange thing? Foreign leader sends murderers here to kill us, laughs about it afterwards, but people who claim that leaving the European Union was a good idea somehow admire Vladimir Putin and call themselves patriots. Patriots? Let's call the whole thing off. Thank you, children. Everyone who's responded to my question about whether you would like to talk about Russians or short skirts in the next hour by suggesting that we talk about Russians in short skirts. I don't know why I bother. I really don't. A bit of a Brexit aside, something I tweeted earlier that's been preying on my mind. You know how nobody likes the Chequers deal? I mean, nobody can like it more than either their fevered imaginings about sunny uplands and unicorns, or the status quo, the Remain position. Chequers is demonstrably inferior to remaining, and it is also demonstrably inferior to free unicorns for everybody, which is still what your Brexiters are punting. Do you think it's possible? Do you remember when I said I used to feel sorry for Theresa May and you all laughed at me? Is it possible that she genuinely sees a deal that nobody wants as the only just solution to a 52-48 split on a binary question? So it's all very well talking about the will of the people, but you're only ever talking about the will of a tiny number of people, really. The difference between the Remain vote and the Leave vote, they're the only people that are relevant in the context of that single binary question, and the chances are that if they were all asked again, you'd get a different result. I don't know for sure that you would. Worst case scenario is you have another vote and it's as close as this one, regardless of which way it goes. But do you think that is, because I'm fascinated by her motivation, and I don't believe, as I know you may, that it is just self-interest and ambition that drives her, and the desire to be Prime Minister overrides everything else. I see a woman, a deeply flawed politician, with a sense of duty that has delivered her to a place where she thinks that a deal nobody wants is somehow just, possibly even honourable on her part. And the best response I got, or the best analysis of that suggestion, came from a chap called Dan Barker. Said a definition of compromise is something that the majority feel, well, I can live with that. I haven't seen any decent research looking at the proposed deal. I'm not sure that the ERG, the Rees-Mogg faction, can live with it yet. They might have to. But when I think about everybody else, your non-extremists, do you think that holds water? That Theresa May knows it's bad, or at least she knows it's worse than remaining. She knows it's better than hard Brexit, so her job is to try to somehow steer a path that nobody's going to like, but which is preferable to all viable alternatives once you rule out remaining, and she's ruled out remaining because of, well, problems within her own party and indeed the result of the referendum. Just some food for thought for you for the weekend. Before that, are we all going to hell in a handcart? Mark Carney suggests that hard Brexit could see house prices plummet by 35%. We have been looking for silver linings. We haven't really found one yet. Ian is in Watford. Ian, what can you tell us?
One of your problems is the fact that we live in this wonderful thing where everybody talks aloud. That conversation that Carney had probably should have been in the cabinet room.
It was.
Without me knowing about it.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but that's journalism, isn't it?
You create a panic. Whether it was deliberate for panic, I don't know, or whatever it is. And also making predictions of 30. I always love it when somebody says there will be a 35, not a 36 or a 30. Making predictions. I don't know how you'd get there.
Well, you do sums.
Can I just come?
Well, no, I'm going to help you with the things you don't know. You do sums with numbers, and at the end of that sum, you get a number. There you go. Happy to help. Carry on.
That's unfortunately one of the problems with economics. You can't do those sums. It doesn't.
Okay. So what do you think he does then? What do you think he does? Just stick a pin in the tail of the donkey?
I think somebody comes up with some numbers, but unfortunately, when you deal with economics...
How do we do a budget every year?
That's why the budgets are never accurate.
Yes, but completely accurate is one thing.
They're not even nearly accurate.
So why do we do it then?
Because somebody's got a job.
Well, this isn't really going well. Take me back to house. Let's start again.
Yeah. But it doesn't give them...
No.
It's
there we go. We got there in the end. It's a guideline. Thank you. Now, talk to me about house prices.
But what is the indicator of what any effect of the house prices will be the price of interest rates?
Well, yes, that's what he explained.
But one of the things that we learn from history is that when the previous crisis happened, it was government policy to believe that you must put up interest rates to stop borrowing and to secure the pound. And of course, both of those things did not happen because it was wrong. And the changes... Let me just finish.
No, I won't let you finish. Not until I've joined in, because it's a conversation. And what you've done is ring up to say you shouldn't trust any forecast or any of these opinions because they're fallible. But I'm right about everything.
No. What I'm saying is...
I like it. I like chutzpah.
What I'm saying is there are options.
Yes.
Now, the options that was chosen when you had the previous banking, the sterling crisis, was to put interest rates up, right?
Well, no. The last sterling crisis was immediately after Brexit, and Mark Carney put interest rates down.
I'm talking about the previous one when
the banking crisis.
Was in, the
banking crisis that had nothing to do with house prices.
Oh, God, what are you talking about?
I have no idea what you're talking about here. I have no idea what you're talking about. The last sterling crisis was immediately after the Brexit vote, so you're not talking about that one.
I'm going before that.
Yes.
Before that.
Right.
When
so what year?
In the late 80s.
Okay, right, yes.
Right? So the policy then was to believe that to prevent people borrowing more and to secure the pound, they put up interest rates. And this was obviously catastrophically wrong. That's why there became so many people in negative equity, and it triggered this cyclical thing of property prices going up.
Right.
Now, the question is, will Carney, if there is a no-deal Brexit, want to go back to the old policy of pushing interest rates up or securing...
mate, I've been on... I can only listen to... I've been on air for 56 minutes. We've covered all of this. The question is whether there is a silver lining to the prospect of a housing collapse. Would you like to answer that or not?
There is no silver lining to anything in life.
There we go. Then we got there in the end. I'll just get on with it. If I will, with your permission. Pascal's in Northwich. Pascal, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
A bit nervous. I'm just amazed that I'm talking to you.
It's only me, mate.
You're one of my heroes.
Oh,
I know it's only you. I knew you were going to say that anyway.
You're one of mine.
I'll describe myself as somebody who has a lot more questions than answers, and I think you probably describe yourself as the same.
You're not wrong.
But this Mark Carney and the property prices just got me thinking about a conversation I had with a friend only about 3 weeks ago who is looking to buy a house, and the conversation went on to houses as investment and how much, the price would go up. And I said to him that, well, Brexit is coming and prices are coming down. And his immediate answer was, well, are you saying that I should hold back for a year?
Oh, yeah.
Which got me thinking about that what happened to the pound after Brexit, and that being something that was unforeseen, and how the economy in some way. And my thought on here is, because this announcement has been made, and that we now know that house prices are going to go down, well, that holds people back from buying houses.
Yes, you like the fellow whose girlfriend's ex-husband is still living in the house that they want to sell. It makes you think it's going to make the market even stickier and even slower. But the uncertainty is already there. I mean, not knowing what happens after March the 31st is already a fairly strong reason why you should probably think twice about making any massive financial decisions today, don't you think?
Well, I do, yes, I do. But my thinking was that, will there be an influx of people holding back from buying houses now, and then buying houses after the vote, after we've actually come out of the EU?
What would you do?
And will that? Well, I don't know, because personally, I live in a house which, I'm planning to sell it because this is my home. But,
yes.
But a lot of people will see that as an investment. I mean, the ideal position, if you're thinking to sell a house, is sell your house now and then buy another one in 12 months' time.
Keep the money in the bank.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but then what? But then what if they do an amazing deal? I know it's unlikely, but what if we remain? Then you're going to feel like a right plum, because the property prices will probably go up. If we remain, property prices are going to go through the roof. No, they're not. But there'll be a short-term boost, won't there? Because the economy will be much healthier in the event of remaining than leaving, and that will be reflected in property prices. And you'll have sold your old house, and it'll probably now cost more than you can afford to buy it back.
Yes. But that's the uncertainty we're in, isn't it?
It is, yes, the uncertainty of chance. I don't know. I don't know any of this.
At the moment, it looks like it's going to be no deal, and it looks like...
Do you think so?
Mark Carney might deal. I think it does.
You don't like my theory of the deal that nobody likes is the one that we'll end up with, because it's the only just solution to a 52-48 result on a binary vote?
I don't know. To be honest, I have no idea. I mean, I'm all for the best Brexit is no Brexit at all.
I know.
I think
It's increasingly hard.
Stupid and ridiculous. And
I can't imagine.
I used to toy with the idea of being an MP, and I decided I probably wasn't clever enough. But then I changed my mind.
Yes, I was going to say. In fact, I think it should be like Groucho Marx's attitude to clubs. Anyone who considers a career in politics should be automatically prevented from ever pursuing one. They should just force people like you and me to run the country, Pascal. Then we'd all be fine.